I chose to do my research on the Australian juvenile justice system. Here's what I found out. This quote shows how society divides people. Society sometimes thinks people that of the lower class should be in prison, while the upper class go to college. The juvenile justice system in Australia holds more Indigenous young people than any other citizen in the country. This puts a target on the back for the young Indigenous people and creates harsh and unfair treatment to them. In Australia, there are separate systems that exist for young people and adults. Children and young people are deemed to have a criminal responsibility if they are the age of 10 or older. Children under the age of 10 cannot be charged with a criminal offense because of their immaturity. Adults in Australia are less likely than young people to be apprehended by the police for allegedly committing an offense. In 2010 to 2011, there were around 30 young people aged 10 to 17 proceeded against by police for every 1,000 in the population, compared to the 18 per 1,000 of age 18 and older. These Indigenous people are from the low poverty areas in Australia. Young Indigenous people were 21 times as likely as non-Indigenous people to be in detention on an average night. Indigenous juveniles are overrepresented in both community and detention-based supervision. Indigenous juveniles make up 53% of all juveniles in detention and 39% under community supervision.
To keep children as young as 10 out of prison. 800 children are incarcerated on average annually, and over half are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander. Duan Hussain took the issue to the global stage, raising it with the United Nations Human Rights Council.
I want adults to stop crawling 10-year-old kids in jail.
A powerful message from the youngest person to address the Human Rights Council.
I came here to speak with you because the Australian government is not listening. Adults never listen to kids like me, but we have important things to say.
After almost landing in prison following an altercation with police when he was 10, Duan Hussain wants the age of criminal responsibility in Australia to be raised. Currently, all states and territories have laws that allow the incarceration of 10-year-old children. The Arunda Garawa boy from Central Australia has told SBS he reached a turning point 2 years ago when he realised things needed to change.
Every day kids get taken away from their families and they never return to them until they're probably 80 years old.
These Indigenous young kids are more likely to end up incarcerated or in detention due to the fact that they are from low poverty areas, and unlike the other citizens, they don't have the resources and stuff they need to flourish. Indigenous juveniles in detention are younger on average than their non-Indigenous counterparts. 22% of Indigenous juveniles in detention were aged 14 or less, compared to 14% of non-Indigenous juveniles.
Indigenous Australians are more likely to be incarcerated than African Americans, according to my research. And this poses a real problem for closing the gaps.
Experts say more than 50% of children in Australian youth detention centres are also Indigenous.
Australian juveniles who come from low-income families, are homeless, in the welfare system, or in foster care are placed further into the juvenile justice system. When it comes to detention and incarceration, these kids are held longer and treated more worse than those of the more affluent nature. There should be more justice for juveniles in Australia, especially for the Indigenous people. Rehabilitation should come into play and should be the main factor in helping these kids grow and become adults. And here is my works cited.